Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in, and you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now. I analyze every free agent signing and also the re-signings, what they mean for the Commanders. Also, if you want to become a member of the show, you can go to the Empire Media YouTube page. You'll see the word join, click on that, find the membership level you're comfortable at, and go from there. I appreciate everybody who's done so. And I appreciate everybody who just listens regardless, because you guys have made this fun for me. Anyway, so in a minute, I'm going to be joined by Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post, just kind of taking a look at the week that was, the busy week for the Commanders, and just what it means for what she thinks this means and what she thought of the plan by the Commanders. You've heard me talk all week about it, but I wanted to get Nicki's opinion. And so now you'll hear that we talk about, like, is the roster better? But maybe there's a better question to ask, and we go over that too. So stay tuned for that. And again, you can follow Nicki on Twitter at Nicki_Jhabvala, NICKI_JHABVALA. You can read her work at the WashingtonPost.com. So before we get there, just two things have happened with trades on Friday and Saturday that impact the draft. First, on Saturday, Chicago traded Justin Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so it basically solidifying the belief they're going to stay at number one and draft Caleb Williams. Now, they haven't come out and said they're taking Caleb Williams, but he is widely regarded as the best quarterback in the draft. And the Bears need a quarterback. So, and that's been from the time the season ended, when you talk to people, and again, it's just, that's what the expectation has been. So it doesn't mean they're always right. It's just that that's what people that I've talked to have expected the Bears to do. So that's one. And then two, the Minnesota Vikings acquired a second first-round pick on Friday. So they now have the 11th and 23rd overall selections in the first round. And why that's significant is because if they wanted to entice, whether it's Washington or New England, to trade out of that pick to move up so they could get a quarterback, and they need a quarterback, then you would need a second first-round pick. Now, it's very possible they want to stay at 11 and pick two guys in the first round. But if they wanted to have a shot at moving up, then I think they needed to get that second number one pick. And I'm not predicting anything with that, but that's what I know, is that if you're a team that's drafting high up, you're not moving back unless there's at least a couple number ones this year. So, but again, I'm not predicting anything. I'm not saying anything, just telling you what happened. Anyway, that's it from me. Here's my conversation with Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. Well, now, so Nicki, I used to say that Michael Phillips was America's podcast guest. I think you're replacing Michael. And I have to tell people, like, going through your publicist this week was awfully difficult to try and get
requests.
So I appreciate it.
Say yes to everybody. So.
But there's a reason people like to have Nicki on, including myself. And so you'll find out why I say that in a few minutes as we start talking. But the other thing is too, I don't know if people knew this, but Nick and I were thinking about starting a podcast about household toys we like to talk about, starting with, power washer, steam cleaner, and then the shop vac.
I'm so jealous you have a steam cleaner and a shop vac.
Yes.
I need one. I need one.
So look for that podcast, wherever your podcasts are found. Like, we'll probably do that in about 5 years or so.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's talk about free agency, because I think people are probably already turning me off by now. What did you think of this week for Washington? I mean, I don't remember having as busy a week from a football standpoint in free agency as we've had this week. But what did you think of the week that was for Washington?
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm glad you added that clarifier. We've had busy weeks.
It's yes.
About other things.
Right.
It's impressive, honestly. I mean, I think they made more football moves in 1 week than maybe all total over the last few years. But it for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was a plan, a longer term plan, not just let's put out some fires here, fill some holes there. It seemed like they went into it with, sort of a multi-year plan on how to not just like address some issues with the roster, but completely overhaul it. They only signed so far 3 of their own free agents. And they brought in, 14 others so far.
I've lost track.
And they've addressed positions of need, they've addressed depth, they've brought in some starters, they've brought in guys that are familiar to them, which, I know Ron Rivera took some heat for doing the same thing, but these guys, I think, were handpicked for largely their leadership and really setting a tone on both sides of the ball to, help develop a younger core. They've said they want to build through the draft, and what they've brought in so far clearly allows them to do that. I know a lot of teams talk about that. We want to build through the draft. We want to do this, but not everyone does that. You can clearly see them doing that and sort of laying a foundation with these veterans that are on shorter deals, and creating an environment where you can really develop young players for the long term.
And it's funny because the familiarity part too, and I was talking about this with someone the other day, like the way free agency is now, where they don't visit teams anymore, very rarely.
Yeah, very
So
rarely.
you want to know guys who you know before, like you don't want to find out later that they're a mismatch like William Jackson.
Right.
But it's also coming from multiple teams, not just one organization that hadn't been winning. But the other part is you talk about a plan. What is it? What did you see as the, and I guess I think we all kind of know what the plan is, but how did you interpret that? Like what the plan is and what you saw from that?
I think it starts largely through building through the draft. So you bring in these guys who, most of them are known for, their work ethic, their leadership, guys that were maybe drafted later or even undrafted that have really worked to prove themselves as either starters or really quality depth players. You look at like Nick Allegretti, started in the Super Bowl, played through an injury in the entire Super Bowl. Not a starter per se, maybe could work to that level. If not, he's played pretty much all over the offensive line and he's a good reserve to have. You look at Bobby Wagner. I mean, he's year 13, still incredibly productive. Maybe not the same Bobby Wagner he was in his prime in Seattle, but he's known as the ultimate leader. He's still a quality player. You bring him in on a short-term deal, he can set that tone on the defense, and he's that vocal leader that I think they've sorely needed for years.
Yeah.
You bring in a Frankie Louvu, opposite side of him at linebacker, an undrafted guy who's really proved himself, was primarily a special teamer, reserve linebacker, and has really proved himself as a key starter and one of the most prolific tacklers in the league. So I think there's a lot of upside with guys like that, and there's a lot of value in the older vets who can set the tone and are on 1 or 2 year deals to help mold the next group.
You talk about the leadership too, and I agree with you. Like they've been lacking that for a while, and Wagner might not be the all-pro guy he was. He's going to be better than what we've seen here. I mean,
Pretty low.
Yeah, and it is pretty low. And I think, but the three of them too, it's also what are you counting on him to do? And when you get Louvu and you have Jamin, you have guys that also, like Bobby Wagner doesn't have to be an every down player, and so, but that leadership thing, when did you notice that like they really need somebody like that?
Yeah, and like I'll be honest, this is gonna be shocking, but I'm slightly cynical. So I know. So I've always kind of had the view that, when there's this talk of, oh, you need the leadership, you got to build. I hate the word culture anymore, so don't even start me on that. But I've always been in the view, okay, these are grown men, they're doing their job. Do they really need like a rah-rah guy? And I realize that there's different forms of leadership, but this was the year that, I'm glad you asked, this was the year that you really did notice it. Because they did have, especially on defense, a lot of young guys on the back end, having Sam, a young guy at quarterback. I think it's much more difficult for guys like that to really step into that, that team voice type role when you're new and young. But when they go through adversity, when you see guys make mistakes, when you see guys that, they're not on the same page on defense, things are not going well, things are tough, things are frustrating. You can see things starting to fray a little bit in the locker room. Who's going to step up and tell them to get their what together? They didn't have that person. They have guys that will maybe chirp and, get in guys' faces, but that's not necessarily what you need.
Right.
You know, you need somebody to kind of galvanize the group, and really set the tone for the young guys that are coming in. This is how you work. This is how you study film. This is how you take care of your bodies, you know, away from the facility. You know, this is how much time you have to put into the game to be great. I don't feel like they had that.
And I
Maybe
also think, also think, Nicki, too, is what you also need are guys that can cross the aisle, like guys who can be, you know, who can, there aren't a lot of guys who I think can do that. I think like when Alex Smith was here, I think he was a guy that could go up to defensive guys and talk to them, you know, and which sounds silly, but you don't always get that. And I think like, you know, guys like Will Compton, Will Blackman back in the day were like that. I have a feeling, London Fletcher, like I have a feeling that Wagner, I think that's more of his reputation that you can, so how, like, don't you, you know, that to me is important to have guys who can kind of
Absolutely.
not just be a linebacker leader or a defensive guy, but a guy who can be a team leader.
Yes. And especially on a team where you're going to have a young quarterback, probably. I think it's paramount. And I think, you know, you look at the staff, I think that's what Dan Quinn seems to do quite well. I mean, just in hearing these guys talk, and, you know, I know you asked a couple questions along those lines during these pressers, you know, what allows Dan Quinn to, you know, really relate to both sides. I mean, he's a defensive minded coach. I think having been a head coach certainly helps with that. But, you know, he's talked about football wise, how being defensive minded has helped him on the offensive side. But, you know, just in hearing from, you know, like, you know, Tyler Biadasz, I hope I said his name right.
Biadasz.
Biadasz. You know,
And
just
it's Teeler.
Stop it. Just in hearing from him on, you know, he came from the Cowboys. He said a reason he came here was Dan Quinn, you know. So I think you're starting to see how this staff is building, you know, this roster methodically too. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You need that leader who can be more than just a voice for their own group, but for the team as a whole.
But you know, it's funny. I was on, I can't remember if it was Bram's show or JP show. It's everything is this whole week was crazy. I mean, I have conversations that I know I had. I don't always remember with who. It's a good thing I write stuff down.
Yeah.
But
I don't even know what day it is. So.
Well, I think it's Sunday, right? Or no,
Is
it's
it?
Saturday.
It's Saturday?
But one of the things that I was asked, like, you know, does this signal that they believe not so much that they can win this year, but they're not settling for being a, you know, 5-win team or something like that. So what do these moves signal? What to you this year do these moves signal?
I think to me, it signals that they're thinking about this year and next year and the year after that and the year after that, which, you know, and this is no disrespect to Rivera or the previous regime, but it did feel sometimes like they were kind of winging it. And a lot of times they had to. There was so much going on with this organization. I know, you know, not to be the ultimate Ron Rivera defender, but I think people sometimes forget how much was going on off the field, and he was the sole voice of the team. Yes, he signed up for that, but it is a lot when you're talking about, you know, multiple NFL-led and federal investigations and everything else. So, you know, unfortunately, I think, you know, some of the on-field coaching, development, roster building, I feel like it should have been more of a priority at times than it was. But I feel like they do have the staff to really focus on that. And the way they've gone about, you know, selecting the free agents so far and how they said they plan to approach the draft, to me, it signals that, yeah, they want to be better now, but they also want to set this team up for, you know, a lot of good years. You know, you have to set the tone now.
Right.
And I don't know that was done before. I think they brought in some key veterans that, you know, maybe they hoped would set the tone, but it didn't work. So
I agree. I think setting, you know, and I always say now it's like identity / culture / whatever, just so it's not just so much emphasis on the one word anymore. Cause I know people got tired of it, but that is what you're trying to do. And it's not just a, you know, there's a workplace culture, but it's how do you want things to look in your you know, organization, in your program. So was there a move, which move of these 3,000 moves that they made, do you just wait? Is there a player that they brought in that I think you like, this is the guy that I think that, you know, could be?
There are two, actually. I mean, ironically, both from the Panthers. I really like Frankie Luvo. I think because I think there's even more upside. He's had a couple really good years in Carolina. I think he could be really good in Quinn's defense. And I just think it's good that they brought in somebody that prolific in the middle of the field because that's been their glaring weakness for a long time. And I also think, if depending on what they decide to do with Jamin Davis, I think it could help him,
Yeah.
and really, especially with Wagner there. Um, so I think that was a quality pick. I also really like Jeremy Chin. He's still fairly young. He had a breakout rookie season, was second to Chase Young in the defensive rookie of the year ratings. I mean, I I think last year I know there was some frustration about his playing time and whatnot in Carolina. I think if used the right way, he could really be an impact player, especially, with Cam Curl now in LA. Having sort of that versatile safety back there, I think could be really good. So I'm curious to see if he can get back to more like what he was, 3-4 years ago.
I'm with you on that. I love the Luvu signing.
Yep.
I think he's going to be really good. And I was watching a lot of him this morning just to see his pass rush. Like, this guy's going to be impactful in that way. And I think the way they're going to possibly use him, and not just with him, but with him in conjunction with some of the linemen they're getting, who we're not talking all pros with the ends, right? You have some guys inside who are pretty good. So I think the combination of all those guys give them options. And I think Chin does the same thing. I'm with you. And I had talked to somebody else who they just somebody in the league, somebody who coach, somebody who knows this stuff, is like, those were the two guys that they mentioned as well. So for the same reasons that you said. And I think Chin gives them that flexibility, now the word no longer is positional flexibility. Now it's just versatility.
Versatility.
There's
You gotta
versatility.
shake it up,
Yeah. But Quinn wants to use three safeties, and now you have your guy.
Yeah.
Were you, I think I know the answer. Were you any surprise with the Cam, Kendall, those guys leaving?
No. I thought Kendall Fuller was probably their best defensive back over the last couple of years. I mean, outside of maybe Cam. But Cam kind of, to me, was more of like a pseudo linebacker recently. Kendall is very good, a smart player, a good veteran for what they needed at the time. I thought there was maybe a chance they might look at him on a one-year deal, but I think the deal he got obviously is way better. I think he's still a very good player. I do worry about how long his knee is going to hold up. I mean, he puts in a ton of work to make sure that he is physically ready every week, and I'm sure it takes a toll on him. Cam, the only surprise to me is that, given what he ultimately got, which is around $4.5 million a year, and his base deal is a $9 million base, 13 max value. I thought maybe they would try to, give him at least that, but I'm still not surprised that they, decided to move on. I never thought he was,
Right.
a 10 or more year player. He's just not. And then once the safety market flooded, it just made things even more difficult for him. But listen, I think Cam is a very good player, a very versatile player, reliable player. Unfortunately, these deals are based largely on numbers, and he didn't have the numbers of some of the top safeties. I think he can get there. I think he can, get those numbers in LA and maybe get another big deal in a couple years. But,
I also wonder too, Nikki, and this is the part that I'd like to know more of, like, what were the numbers being thrown around before free agency? Because what he gets is not necessarily what was being thrown around. Because that I think typically it's going to be a lot higher in their own minds about where it can go. And so if somebody's looking for that, then you've got to move on. So once he hit free agency, I think we all figured he was gone. And I'm with you on Kendall. Kendall, I think both of them are very smart. I think that was one of the things. And, but with Kendall, I think but the knee, I think for a long 2 years is not a long-term deal, which is what he got in Miami. But I wondered the same thing is, could you go, because they have to fill that now. And that's the one thing that, how are they going to fill that? Like, how do you view that spot now, and where could they go, do you think?
I I mean, I would like to see them still sign a veteran free agency in this next week. And I think they could, maybe like a Stephon Gilmore. I think he's still available, right? Get in. You need a veteran though with that group. I think it helps having Chin. I think it helps having Wagner at linebacker, but I think you still need a veteran cornerback there. I think they have some good pieces, but they need to see how they fit within Quinn's scheme. Benjamin St. Juste, I think he is a freak athlete. I think he needs development just to kind of clean up his technique and, try to avoid some of the penalties that he racked up. But he's a freak athlete, and I think there's still plenty of room to like really work with him and develop him. And he's got the makeup that so many teams love for a corner. That tall, long, he's fast. I mean, he's like a track star corner, right? I want stock in his kids. Because his wife is
Yes.
also a track athlete, so I'm sure they will have amazing
Yes.
athlete kids. Emmanuel Forbes, I say you just don't know what he is still.
No.
I mean, you have to develop that kid. Clearly there's significant talent there. It's not coincidence that you put up the numbers he did in the SEC. But they have to really work on them to help that game translate to the pros. And I think they can. I hope this staff can, because you don't want to waste another first. But I think it would help to have a veteran in that cornerbacks room. So
I think they missed Chris Harris last year as a defensive backs coach.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of this for Emmanuel is going to be up to Emmanuel and how he improves. And then clearly the coach is going to have an influence in that, but it's always going to be up to the kid to ultimately do it, because you can only push so much. You can only teach so much. The person has to want to do it. I'm not saying he does or he doesn't, but I'm just saying, I'm not just going to put it all on, Jason Simmons here. Now it's all solved. And Joe Witt and Dan Quinn, ultimately the kid's got to go do it himself, but the talent is there. And so if he does, I mean, seems like a good kid. There's nothing, I don't think there's there's no attitude issues, but it's more, you've got to go do it. And if you do, you can be a good player. But I would still look for someone else just in case, whether it's in the draft or maybe even, like you said, a veteran. A Gilmore would be a 1-year deal type thing if they wanted to go that route. But I would certainly look for somebody else there. I mean, they need more help there. And then,
the one DB that I'm really excited to see in this defense is Derek Forrest. I just think he'd be a really good fit in this defense. I think he could put up even more numbers. I just like the way the kid plays.
Yeah.
I know he was injured last year. So just to see how they use him in the scheme, I think it'll be really interesting, especially with Keim gone and now with Chin there. Just, how do they plan to use him?
Well, the other thing is, Nicki, along those lines is we've heard the word dog quite a bit. And it's, like Dan Quinn's he likes that dog in guys. I mean, I think you're going to hear that a lot. And you hear some of these newcomers talk about, he's got some dog in him. Derek Forrest has some dog in him.
Yeah.
Dude likes to bark. I mean, he
will
likes contact, and that sounds funny from him, but he does. And so I think he's got that mentality that I think they will like.
That's exactly it. I mean, when you think about sort of the thumper safety, he is a true thumper safety, but I think he's more versatile than that. I think he, if developed a little more, I think he could be a good cover safety too. But you need, sort of the guy that's willing to take on the contact, because not all safeties are.
No.
There are a lot of center fielders out there that just don't want to take on the safety, but I think him and Shin could be a really interesting tandem. Really interesting.
I remain a big Quan Martin
a
fan of his game, and I think he's going to be good too. The other one, Sam Howell getting traded.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, they were going to pick a quarterback.
Sure.
But how did you process that deal?
Once they signed Marcus Mariota, it seemed like they were probably going to move Sam Howell, because just to have a guy like that as third string, that's just too much value just sitting there.
Right.
He has a year of starting experience. He's proven he has some really good traits that in the right system with the right people around him, I think he could be at least a very good backup.
Yeah.
Part I don't quite understand yet is the Marcus Mariota signing. To me, it signifies that, you're going to have a young quarterback, and he's the type that can either help mentor that kid or step in and start early or in between if need be. But he's not the one I would have taken. I have questions about how things ended in Atlanta, which, I haven't spent enough time around him. I don't want to question a guy's leadership without being around him or talking about him. But at that whole incident, I have questions. And, I think there's obviously a ton of talent there. It's just, if you're bringing somebody in primarily for leadership, after that, I have questions. So,
right. I'm with you. That was an issue. That was something that popped up there. And so
yeah,
the one thing I wonder along those lines, Nikki, is he's coming to a situation where they're going to pick this guy. So you have to be, I wonder if that'll make a difference.
yeah. I mean, listen, I think the good thing about Marcus Mariota is he's seen it all. He's been through it all. Like you said, he's been benched, he's been cut, he's had bad moments, he's had some good moments. And I think that can only make a player better, especially as they play through it and stick through it. But I really want to see, how will he be in, helping a younger player, developing a younger player. And it's not solely on him, obviously, but being that voice in the room that a younger guy needs, and the guy to show the way. Because I think that's important.
Sure.
It's at that position more than any other, frankly. So maybe he turns out to be very good in this role. I hope so. But that was the only one where I was like,
That's one. And I would agree with that. Because like the other thing is we saw how good Jacoby was last year.
Right.
In that
and
role.
I would love to know more about why he did not come back. Was there not an offer? Did he not want to? Did he?
Yeah, because it seemed like from the start, it never seemed like it was going to be an option for him. And I don't know. And I couldn't talk to his agent because his agent is him. And so, but what I also wondered, like, Brian Johnson knows Mariota. He had him last year in Philly.
Sure.
The familiarity thing is a big deal to them. And then maybe for Jacoby, if he knows like they're going to pick player X the spot, now he's going to New England where they're going to pick a young guy too, most likely. So I don't know. And so who knows?
It might have been, it was a better situation, New England. It just made sense. But, he, in my mind, was that perfect type of backup.
He took care of Sam a lot. And Sam talked about that a lot. And then that's very, very important. It's just having a guy when you come off the field to help you and to be in your ear about like, hey, don't forget about this. Look at this during the week, showing you how to prepare for game with the game film, et cetera. Alex Smith was a great guy like that when he was hurt here. And, so I think Carson Wentz was good with these guys a couple of years ago when he was hurt. So you need to have that guy
that can step in and win too, if should anything happen, and Jacoby can do that,
Now, last thing then too, when you look at this roster, how much do you look at the rosters being appreciably better, or how do you view it? And it's also like, I always say like the roster, but it's also really the team, because you have to take into account the coaching, how they might be used. I think it's going to be better, especially on defense. But how do you look at the roster now after this week?
Yeah. I think it has a chance to be better. I'm now always hesitant to say it is better, because I thought that last year. I thought that especially the secondary last year. Oh, they're deeper. They have much more talent, and it was frankly a train wreck. So on paper, I think they have a much better chance to be a quality team for the long term. I really like the plan. I really like the moves they've made. I like how aggressive they've been in free agency, and aggressive in, but methodical. I mean, they're not going after like the top money guys, which is, and they have the money, but I really like how they've gone about it. So yeah, I do think they have a very good chance to be a quality team, an underrated team, a team that, others will have to look for, but I'm hesitant to say that they'll be better until we actually see them.
Well, we don't even know, because we don't know how the quarterback's going to look, or what level he can get to this year. We don't know who the left tackle is. I do think defensively, but again, this is what looking at paper, but I think the combination of how these guys can be used, I think the quality of the coaching staff is going to be a big difference there. And then I really like Frankie Luvu. I think he's going to have a really good impact the way they're going to use him. And so, just need to, but cornerback is still a question mark. So I think there's a lot to learn, but like what you said, and I guess maybe a better thing to ask would be the program is in a better spot.
Yes,
More
exactly.
so than the roster, is the program in a better spot, because it looks like this is, and you brought this up earlier, this is about building for the long term, not just trying to win this year.
Yeah. And because to me, the two biggest issues in recent years, and I hate to keep making comparisons, but I felt like they were really lacking in talent evaluation and development outside of, whatever else they needed, the quarterback, whatever. But just in talking about how they built their team, and I feel like there's much more confidence in the talent evaluation. I think that is absolutely Adam Peters' forte. I mean, he started from the very bottom as a scout and has been known for that throughout his career. And you're starting to see it by the guys he's picked. Ultimately we'll see how it translates on the field, but I feel like they're in a much better place there. The development side, we'll see how this coaching staff handles it throughout training camp and throughout the season. So, but yeah, I do like the beginnings of this. It instills much more confidence.
How much difference do you think it made to having front office coaching staff clear lines of your job, clear lanes that you're in? How much difference do you think that made?
Huge. And listen, it works for some, like it works for Bill Belichick in New England, right? I mean, and I understand why that appealed to Ron Rivera and coming here, like having a say over the guys that you're coaching. Absolutely. But I think having that delineation, I think is important for the coach too. It gives some buffer, he's not the one person that's being, asked about every little move in the organization. It allows him to focus on just the field. But I also think, just based on how they've done this so far, I'm not in the room, so I don't want to speak too much about it, but it does seem like there's some good collaboration there just on how they're going about picking these guys, because clearly there are players with connections to numerous people within the staff. Right. So I would imagine that a number of people have input on this, but ultimately it's Adam Peters' call. And I just think it's important to have sort of those buffers between the position, the roles.
Would you say the vision was aligned?
It was an aligned vision.
But it's true. And I do think too, to have like Adam Peters is in charge of this. There's no, I think there were times for Ron, certainly over the last couple of years where, you're in charge of this, but you need help here, but like, whose turn is it to then, you know what I mean? Like that's where things start to get blurry. And then, someone else is doing this, someone else is doing that. And I think that's where, that's why the clear lines to me is a big deal for this group. So I think that'll make a difference too. So I'm with you. I think this is set up better for the long haul. Whatever they do this year, I still think it's set up better for the long haul.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. My dogs are wrestling behind me. Just ignore that.
Well, my dog's 13 and a half and he's going to sleep most of the day again. Yeah. So there you go. Nikki, you're the best. There you go. Oh yeah. Now I would show you mine, but if I turn my camera, you're going to see like a couple coffee mugs, like a bunch of notepads. And, it's just, I'll be honest, like this week has been a blur, and that's why I have 2 coffee cups here and multiple notebooks are out. And
isn't it nice though, that we're not calling Congress,
It is that I don't think, it's funny because God, it's almost, there sometimes you get a thing at night, like, oh, they just signed somebody. I'm like, it's better than, oh, somebody just sent a letter to Congress. Somebody just filed something to the DEA or whatever. Right. Like, this is so much better. It's not, I wouldn't say listen, we're not digging ditches and doing things and curing cancer. It's just that it becomes a long day and it gets busy. That's fine. But it's so much better to be writing about oh my gosh, they just signed Bobby Wagner. I'd rather write about that 100 times out of 100 than, somebody calling and say, we're trying to smear this guy or we're doing this. I mean, it's a lot.
Or trying to track down all the people that could be involved in the purchase of the team.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
have Matthew McConaughey's publicist. No, I cover football. I'm sorry.
It's what you know what the hard part is, like, I'm still on some of these lists,
I
the
know. Me too.
mailing lists, like, no, no, no. And it's I have so much, I don't know if it, I don't want to
It's
say,
getting serious back here. I hope
oh
you're
my
winning
goodness.
this. It is
Yeah,
getting
no.
like I feel like I should keep score or something. This is why we don't have nice things in my house.
There you go. Well, that's why you need the shop vac to maybe clean up for them. And there you go. That
Let me
I'm
borrow
telling you,
it.
it
Let
was
me
a
borrow
game
it.
change. It was a
Just
game
let me
changer
borrow
for me
one.
when I bought that.
Just come on, let me just one time. Just let me borrow it.
I mean, I use it this morning. And I use it. I think my wife knows I use it because I have it, not because I necessarily always need to, but I just like, I'm using my shop vac today. That's what I'm doing. Couple weeks, it's the power washer on the deck.
I love the power washer.
The power
Great.
wash on the deck day is a great day. I don't know why, but it just is.
That's great. That's
Yes.
great.
There you go. Nicki, you're the best. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to Nicki for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back with another podcast. This will be out for the weekend, so either Monday or Tuesday morning. Not sure which. Just pay attention. You'll see it. And there you go. Talk to you next time.